Hello, I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops, and I'm in the process of sharing some of the things with my life. Last week, I talked about my upbringing and the snobbery and things that I had to deal with in a time when we had upper class, middle class, lower class, and street people. And of course, we had segregation of our religions and of our species. And I'm happy to say that throughout my life, I have spent a great deal of time with many different kinds of people, from people who are living on the street to queens and kings and famous people. So what I'm here to do today is Spirit has been telling me that while I've written books like this one, which I'm going to show you, which is my life story, and I mentioned it in the video, The Truth, the last long one that I made, and you might like to read that, which is more about my psychic side of things and how I evolved to become who I am today. But I'm going to put this down, and I'm actually going to introduce you to this one: pro-life, pro-choice, pro-spirit. Now, there's a long journey before I got to writing this. So I want to literally go back in time and talk to you about how things were when I was a very young woman. Now, the first thing to understand in Britain was that nobody was considered an adult until they turned 21 years old. So that meant that technically even the boys who signed up at 18 to go to war and fight with World War II were really still children. But because there were so many situations going on with Europe and the war, that so many soldiers were dying that they lowered it so that the younger boys could go over. And of course, many of the women who were left behind in England were actually finding themselves, I'm just looking, I don't know what that was, something said something, I'm sorry. So I'll carry on. So many of the women who were left behind had to fill the jobs that the men would normally do. And so they were working in factories, making bullets, making big rockets to send over and bomb the Germans or anyone else, and cars, so many things. Women suddenly took over the world in England to be able to allow all the men to go fight and protect the shores of England. And of course, there were many times when people thought that the Germans would actually invade England. And it came close to that, but fortunately it never really happened. But what happened for me during that time was, as I said in my last talk, that I was running up to people and giving them messages so that people would know that their hubbies or someone missing in action was still alive. And so by the time I was 10, I was really integrated into being a psychic. I don't want to repeat myself in my last video, but what I do want to say here is that around 10 and 12 years old, after the war had ended, obviously, we were seeing a lot of white women who were dating colored people, and that's how they called it in England. So colored could be anything from Hispanic to black, and of course nobody was used to mixed marriages in those days. In fact, the opposite was very important, that one as a young woman was to find a nice white person if you were white, or if you were black, to find a nice black person that you could enjoy and live with for the rest of your life. And that was how people thought. They wanted, a Mr. Prince Charming to ride into their life and sweep them up on that horse, like in all the fantasy stories, and carry them off into the great light white, where everything was happy and peaceful. And of course, what I talked about in my past recording on my upbringing during the war, and my dad coming back, there was an awful lot of talk about class distinctions, our background, our royalty background, on both sides of my family going back to the 1600s. And certain things that went on in life. For example, my family owned the St. Kitts Islands out in the ocean where they grew tobacco and things like that. And even today, my sister went there long before she passed, but she went there and they still had the name Pogson all over the place. And most of the black people were carrying the name Pogson because that was my maiden name. That was the name of my ancestors. And so, yes, a whole bunch of people over there with that name, which is kind of interesting. And yes, the actual hospital that they built in the 1600s was still in existence as a metaphysical center, which really pleased me to hear that. Well, of course, I was too busy traveling all over the world to be able to go there myself, which is a shame. But that's not about why I'm talking today. I want to go back in time to the status that women had. So when the American soldiers came over to England towards the end of the war, they came with themselves silk stockings and makeup and all sorts of things. So it was very easy to woo the women of the time to want to date them. And of course, a lot of the women actually got pregnant. And because the men were officially not allowed to marry the girl in England, there was a lot of rules and regulations that I heard about where people were trying to bend the rules and marry their sweetheart, but a lot of them couldn't, or maybe they had a sweetheart back home and they'd spun a few lies to the woman in England who unfortunately got pregnant. So what happened during those years was the back streets of the East End of London were the places where women would go to have an illegal abortion. Now, bearing in mind I was only 10 when I started hearing about this, I was very ignorant and very protected about sex and things like that, so I really didn't know too much about sex. I had a very good schooling, as I said, and my mother and father both made sure I knew all about how sex was performed and what, certain things one should take in precautions to not get pregnant and so on. But you've got to remember there wasn't much going on in those days. The male protection was really more like a rubber thing cut off the end of shall we say, a glove today, a modern rubber glove. So can you imagine having fun in the bedroom with a thick thing like that between you and the flesh? So there were a lot of women who didn't want to do that. And there was no medicines to literally stop yourself getting pregnant like we have today. So one had to rely very much on kind of withdrawals and things like that. And of course, that doesn't necessarily prove to be safe. So yes, there were many women in England that got pregnant. And unfortunately, because they got pregnant and because they birthed a baby, they were typecast as sluts. And sluts basically meant a woman of low morals. So it didn't matter even if she was from a big family, a background of upper class people. If she got pregnant, she was immediately a slut. Well, I want to fast forward now into the years where I was nursing. And during that time, I met my first serious boyfriend. And of course, it was inevitable that one was going to try and figure out how one could feel in the bedroom. And yes, like so many women that were over there in those days after the war, I was 18, 19. I thought I was desperately in love. He told me he was in love with me. So what happened was I got pregnant. Well, as soon as he found out that, it was, okay, no, I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to be married. I don't want anything. What have you done to me? It's your fault, and so on and so forth. So it became necessary for me in my nursing structure to meet someone who could, in some way, keep my baby from being grown. And in those days, and I don't want to be too gruesome, but I want to tell you it was very, very painful. And there were many, many women who were having these abortions, and many were dying because they would bleed to death. But I'd had my nursing background, so I knew what to do. So when you are pregnant, there is what we call the internal and external os, that's OS, that is the entry to the womb. And so long as that entry is kept open, it is inevitable that the baby will eventually come away. And I'm happy to say I knew what to do for myself, and to be able to say that the inevitable did happen. I did lose that child, and I was much further along than I thought I was. I thought I was 2 months. It turned out I was 4 months. And so I lost a little boy. How did I feel? Guilty, upset, miserable, all sorts of things. But my mother took over and without hesitation sent it in the toilet out to the great waters somewhere in the ocean. I was so upset. I wanted to bury this child, and I wanted to reprimand my ex, who obviously had not been careful way before that I thought I had not been careful. So I want you to understand here, just by talking about it, how women were very hush-hush to let people know that they were having a pregnancy going on. And there were many people who didn't know too much about things. Well, I was still nursing during that time, and I had another friend who had got pregnant by her husband, and he had married her, and he was an Indian person. So I was friendly with both of them, and on a particular night, and I'm not holding back here, I'm telling you the truth, on a particular night, my boyfriend I'd been told was running off with someone else. And so, I was really upset. So my girlfriend's husband decided to take me down to the local pub, and he kept buying me sherries. And I kept saying, no, I don't want any more. I don't normally drink. But 5 glasses of sherries, yay big, were lined up in front of me. And the more he talked me into drinking it, the more I did. So by the time I was walked home and was, pretty drunk, I can tell you that. I really didn't know whether I was coming or going. And so he took me home, and while I was in the house, as far as I know, I passed out. And when I came to, that man had penetrated me, and there was my second thought, oh God, not again. But at that time, I had a nursing friend who told me about ergometrin, which was a herbal remedy that was used by the hospitals to bring on an abortion when there needed to be a legal one done because of threat of life and, of course, death. And so I was given some of those, and they did the trick. So I was now, not very long along. I was treating myself immediately because I'd known what he'd done, and I didn't want to be pregnant, so I was taking the pills. Now, you might say, how could she do that? How could she do that? Well, the bottom line is, no matter how you might think you want to birth a baby, the societal structure was so bad, there was nowhere to go and get support. And if you went home to your family, assuming they were upper class and had the money, they would have sent you over to another country where that child would be taken away and adopted. And you would never see that child again. Well, of course, I didn't want to tell my parents all this, and I didn't want them to know what I was going through. So I went through it all on my own with a couple of friends who supported me. And after that, I started to wonder, why had Spirit allowed me to be pregnant? And I found out that on each occasion when my spirit guides came to talk to me, that they had told me that they had bonded with me through the body, through my life, through everything I'd experienced, so that they could be in that baby during that pregnancy with no intention whatsoever of wanting ever to be born. Well, in a way, that made me not feel guilty that I hadn't birthed a child. But on another level, I was emotionally disturbed because I now knew not only had I been pregnant twice with humans, but there had also been a time when aliens had made me pregnant as well when I was 15 and definitely a virgin. So that you can read in my journey into the oneness. I'll hold it up again so you can read what I went through in that situation. So now you understand that I know that there are for sure aliens who are making many women and did in those times make many women pregnant. And we had a lot of women who were talking about it and hush-hushed about it, and nobody wanted to believe anyone. So you were mentally considered insane, and your family would put you into an insane asylum. Yes, that's what they were called. And there you were brought to term, and if they found a baby came out that looked alien, I'm afraid there was bad things done. Nobody knew what was done, but I learned via some other women over time that they drowned those babies and buried them. So you see, there are a lot of women who, during World War II, were saying that aliens had made them pregnant. And I had the same thing. It's in my book. I'm not going to repeat it all now because it's not about me being pregnant that I want to talk to you about. It's about everyone, whoever they were in that time and on into the 50s and 60s, were still talking about the fact that aliens had come into their bedrooms and made them pregnant. But during that time, they started to talk about things like, was Jesus an alien baby? Because it was begun to be known and understood that what the aliens did is mentally put the woman into a state of delight to think she's having sex with a man, when in truth the aliens were implanting a seed that was already germinated by them into the womb of these young women. And so Spirit was telling me that this was going on, and they told me that this had indeed been done to me, even though I remembered everything, and that's, like I said in my other book, My Life Story. But I'm not on about that now. I'm talking about how women categorically were abused, not only by men, but also by aliens. And they had no one to talk to, nowhere to go, and were isolated. And obviously, the babies that they were having that were alien were not brought to full term. In my case, for example, as soon as the quickening had happened, I remember that someone came, I was taken up to the ship, and afterwards I was put down, and 3 or 4 days I had milk coming out of my breast, and the usual things that a woman sees after birthing. And when I went to my mother and showed her, she was like, oh, I don't know what to say. It must be a fantasy pregnancy. And yes, a lot of people tried to tell themselves they were fantasy pregnancies. But more importantly, what I want you to understand is the aliens were making new babies, mixture of male and them, female and them, both sides, so that they could then populate another planet in another area in our solar system. Now you might say, well, where are they? We never meet them. But if you think of the sun, and let's say the Earth is here, and their planet is here, and they're going round the sun like this, they never see one another. You see what I'm saying? So we can't see them, and they can't see us, but they exist. And what the aliens do is make sure that the world, in terms of whatever world they're looking at, is populated and in many ways controlled. But that's another big story. So I don't want to go any further with that. But I do want you to understand that there still are women today who are announcing at these big space conferences and things that they have been pregnant many, many times. There's certain people I know who said they were made pregnant every 6 weeks. Well, I have to tell you that that isn't true. They may think it was every 6 weeks, but the reality of it is that the time they take the baby away is at the quickening, and that's when you have the seeing afterwards. And that's also when you wonder what's wrong with your body, because you have different things going on. So where are we talking about quickening? We're talking about 2 to 3 months, depending on which nation, which baby is mixing with the aliens. So anything that happened like that was going to be 8 weeks. And then you've got your body needs to recover for another at least a month or two. So you're looking at something like 3.5 months before aliens could possibly make you pregnant again. So I learned about all this. Spirit was teaching me all this while I was a teenager. And why has it happened to me? And they were saying that what has been happening with the aliens throughout a very, very long time, centuries, and going back and so on, have been making babies and taking them and putting them on other planets for a very long time. Now, I was also interactive with other species as well. I don't want to bore you with that right now. I want to make a much better recording of that later, but I do want you to understand that this later led to a lot of psychics telling people they were a walk-in. And a walk-in basically meant that they thought they'd been somebody else's body, and then the walk-in person was an alien made by alien somewhere else and walked in to possess the body of a woman. And what happened during that time was a lot of women started to believe they could be independent of men, that they could start to believe that they could have their own business or find a better job where they paid more money. So that was an anatomical, terminal kind of thing that was going on with women, not only in England, but of course I'm speaking about that because that's where I was living, but it was happening all over Europe as well. So now that you know I've set up how the circumstances were in terms of the wartime, I also want you to understand that if we go back to the 1800s, where women were married off to men by arranged marriages, and the man would come into the bedroom of the night time and do his business and thank you, ma'am, and leave, that there were many, many women who had no appreciation of the idea of sexual play in terms of having a wonderful time with their husbands. It felt like abuse. So fast forwarding into this time where the 60s were coming along and 70s, which was the age where I was interactive with boyfriends and so on, it was made clear that our generation did not want to be abused. We didn't want a man to just turn up, do it, make us pregnant and leave and say we have to be married. We wanted to fall in love. And of course, I was pretty certain I was in love. And the boyfriend concerning the first one I mentioned came back to me and said, I do love you. Can we carry on? And I told him, get lost. After what you've made me go through? No way. Okay. And of course, the things that happened to me as a 15-year-old, I had conversations with the alien father of that much later. So I do know a lot about that. But now I want to focus more on what happened with women in general after World War II ended. Because they'd worked in the factories or in the offices and been in a commanding position, they were expected to step down and let all the returning men take over those jobs and start up the businesses again. So they were all sent home to be cake mixers and dinner cookers and so on. And they weren't happy campers because, again, the men were coming home. I haven't had a good time with a man, my wife, or whatever. I'll promise you the moon, and hey, let's have babies. And then they'd run away with someone else and leave the woman with a baby and no marriage rings and so on. So at that point, it caused a lot of women to believe that the only thing they could do is sell their bodies. And during that time, I was evolving in different ways. I actually met a man named Donald Russell, and fell in love with him, and he was 11 years older than me until we got married. And he'd known about the abortion thing because he'd helped me. That's how I met him. And so I felt very safe. Well, it wasn't long until after I'd had one baby that he started to say that he wanted nude pictures of me. Well, remember, I'm inhibited, I'm restricted. I've been through a lot of issues with boyfriends and so on, and being raped and everything. And it's like, don't ask me to do things like that. I'm a lady, I'm born a lady. I don't do that kind of thing. Well, he didn't let it rest. He kept on and on. I need it. I need to see you naked and so on. And one day he came home with some man's phone number, who was older man, and said that he was very genuine photographer and he would take these photos of me nude. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I'm yelling at him, leave me alone. Don't pester me. What a baby, and so on. But it didn't end there. He didn't let it rest. And so ultimately, the railroad of mind consciousness was so broken down in my head that I finally agreed to meet the photographer. And the photographer was a very nice senior man. Remember, I'm 21 or 2, something like that. And this man's easily about 60 odd. And he posed me in certain positions and made sure certain parts were covered. And so I sat there looking sheepish, and he'd say, smile, and I'd sort of go, oh. But slowly I got used to him, and he was a very nice gentleman. And then he developed the photos and brought them over to my husband, who was just over the moon with the pictures of me. And so for a while, things were quiet. And then I got another baby. So now I have 2 children by him. And then it starts up again. He wants more women in his life. He wants to have sexy parties. And he wants me to be a part of that. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not a whore. I don't want you to do that. Leave me alone. I've got 2 babies. I don't need to do this, and so on. Well, during that time, we also had bought a house, and we were renting out rooms. And into that house came an unmarried mother. And during that time, he had said that he would allow her to stay, but the baby had to be adopted. And what I found out once she'd moved in with me was that she'd already given away a son the day she moved into our house, because on 2 occasions, in both situations, she had been raped on a one-night date and got pregnant. And so the poor woman didn't know anything, didn't have nursing background like me, and so she had no choice but to bring that baby into the world. And the first one, she got a job, she tried to work, they had foster parents looking after it, but they kept on, they wanted to adopt the child. And then she met another man who raped her and she got pregnant again, so she had to make up her mind to give that first child away. And so then into the world, she's living in my house. My husband at the time is saying he wants to enjoy other women and that he doesn't love me anymore and he wants to leave. And so he starts saying to me, you should do more modeling because you're pretty and beautiful and you'll be able to make enough money to keep your children. So I said, well, what about you? You're going to give me, money every month. Oh, no, I can't do that. I'm buying another house. I've set you up by doing the nude modeling, blah, blah, blah. You'll be able to make enough money. Well, the truth is I had no alternative but to go modeling. And so I was doing striptease modeling. And obviously, I always made sure I was turned away, that it was left the man wondering what the hell I was looking at, because that was the in thing to do in those days. And of course, having things on and taking them off and looking saucy and sexy was more important in the striptease part rather than anything else, because nothing else happened. After that, the 2 or 5 minute movie would go black. And I would be paid a lot of money to do that. So yes, I could pay my mortgage, I could buy food, I could pay my gas, and I pay my electricity. Where could a woman earn that kind of money anywhere else in those days? Nowhere. The men were earning all the income and paying all the bills, and the women were going shopping, doing the washing, and so on. And I had that for a little while with Dawn, but it didn't last. So into that world, I worked, and it made it possible for the woman who was moved in with me to have that child and keep that child. I didn't want her to lose her child. So we worked together. She worked in bars because that's the only thing women could do, is work in, pubs in England at night and make tip money. And that, on serving the drinks. And she was not fiddling around with any men, but she was looking for a husband. And eventually she found one. And so she moved out. But by then I had met a real agent who saw my beauty of the day and asked me, had I ever done acting? And there I had to say yes. As a child, I was in church parochial concerts. I used to sing in the London Schoolgirl Choir Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall and the Royal Festival Hall, through all the schools that came together and formed a choir, and also an orchestra. So we had these nights where we would perform at these marvelous theatres where people would come from all over. And I did have a little solo now and again, and I was obviously very nervous, but it was entertaining for me. And so when I got rid of the first husband and I married my second husband, Malcolm, I had 2 more boys. Now, he knew about my past, but he also was wanting to build his own business. I won't bore you with all of that, but during that time now, I'm really modeling and I'm in movies and I'm, doing all sorts of stuff. So I'm making good money in England. And we get into doing book jackets. And I needed, when you have a sexy scene on the cover, they try and ask you to bring your husband or someone, that you're close to. And so I brought my husband, and he liked to do a photo now and again with me. And of course, we're dressed, but I was also doing, Elstree Studios, extra work. In movies and so on. And as I got older, I was singing because I still like singing. I was, finding sort of operatic societies that are amateur, and we'd put on shows like Sound of Music And so I loved singing, I loved performing, and so that continued for me to make money. Now, while all that was happening, there was something else happening, something untoward. Because I'd been with an agent during the time of doing the little striptease things, I was asked by a police organization to come and visit with them, and I didn't know what it was all about. But when I got there, short version of all of this was the police were looking to break down all the abuse on all the women of the time to make sure that they weren't pulled into prostitution and so on. And they asked me if I would be a spy for them. And I'm like, well, I don't know. This could be dangerous for me. But I got set up, and I did, and I worked with a lot of prostitutes, helping them to understand how they could become free and independent. I stimulated them through my readings and my psychic work to help them understand that they could become hairdressers, do nails, massaging people's bodies and so on. And of course, being prostitutes, a lot of the work that they did with the men was sort of massage in different ways. So that seemed something that they could do. Meanwhile, they were giving me names of the peoples who were abusing them and misusing them. And some of them were lords and ladies and people at the top of the tree and so on. And I was walking this very narrow pathway of letting people think that I was on the game when I actually wasn't, and getting information and feeding it back to source. And there was one day a big blase on all the newspapers where all the names that I'd been handing over to the police were exposed. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea just how big a closed door was that was opened for the world to understand just how many women, whether they were street women or whether they were from good families, who were trying to put themselves through university because the good families didn't have that kind of income. I knew doctors, I knew lawyers who were all in university at Cambridge and places like that, who were doing striptease. And because I was doing striptease, so we were all doing striptease, so we all shared with one another and talked to one another, but we all knew how to do it secretly. And so in every way that we did it, we would not show everything. One lady I knew was brilliant with large ostrich fans, and she would do 5 or 6 striptease in different Soho clubs in one night and make herself £1,000. And that then would go to pay her education. I didn't make that kind of money, and I didn't work that kind of scenario. I did not work bars or things. I just worked with professional photographers. And a lot of the things were like getting in and out of a bath with bubble soaps and things. So, I want you to understand that while I was doing this, I wasn't thinking I'm a psychic medium, even though I was helping them, even though I was giving them messages, and I was talking them into build up their self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value, I was teaching myself the same things as I'm telling all these women, you're worth more and you should be something greater and better. I'm hearing me saying the same thing. But you got to remember, I'm also going to the churches, spiritual churches, on Sundays and doing church services. So I have a minister hat, I have a mother hat, I have a go out and striptease hat, and I have an actress hat. So I was trying to find my way to understand, who am I really? Why am I thrown into all these different predicaments when I didn't want to be in those predicaments? And then spirit guides would say to me, you have to know the world. You have to understand how women all over the world are abused. Well, at that time, I was hearing about the Middle East where women who had literally had sex with some man was beheaded for having sex with a man by her brother or her father who saw her as a prostitute. That hit me hard. I thought to myself, my God, all these women that I've been helping to get out of being a prostitute to go into a career at a time when careers were very difficult to be. So I was teaching these women how to be psychic, how to read tarot cards, how to do psychometry, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience in a time when nobody was talking about this. And so I was teaching these women to think, how could I do someone's hair in a creative mode by inspiration? So, okay, if I'm doing my hair and I'm fixing it up to go to some party to be a prostitute, how could I teach someone who isn't a prostitute to let me do my hair for her and show her that I could also do her hair for her? So we started to work on that to help women who are in the game to come out of the game and start doing the hair of other girls who were in the game, but who needed their hair to be done nicely for them. So in another direct way, or indirect if you want to see it that way, we can actually say the prostitutes who wanted and did get out of the game became therapists because I was teaching them what to do, like massage or crystal acupuncture or whatever I could do with them. And I'd make classes for them in Soho area where I could teach them. And of course, sometimes while they're in a class with me, there would be a knock on the door and there would be one of her clients who's come for a quickie. And so what we'd have to do is put her lesson on hold while I went in the kitchen and made a cup of tea and she performed. Yes, I was right there with them all, helping them deal with slowly getting rid of their clients and slowly improving their skills and talents to become makeup artists, to get into show business, to do different things. And occasionally, after a while, after many years of integrating with these women who were on the game, I obviously was not in there anymore. I'd married and had 2 more children, and my husband had a business and I was running that business for him in terms of secretary and ordering parts and doing all that as well. So I was a very busy mother with 4 children, helping all the women who were on the game get out of the game, and at the same time helping all the churches that I was teaching at in different areas in the south of London, north of London, east of London, and then west of London. And then from there going on up to the middles of the country, areas like Birmingham and up finally to Scotland. And so I was still doing a bit of modeling because we needed it because the second husband was still trying to build the business and he knew what I was doing. And by now I'm not stripping. I'm wearing clothes. I'm modeling clothes and we're like hanging around lampposts in Scotland looking beautiful and pretty in the latest mini dresses, right? So I got home to visit my mom and I got a mini dress on from a shoot I'd done and she's like, what are you doing? Showing all your butt. I said, I've just been working. What are you doing working? I've been on a photo shoot. What are you doing with photos? See, I'd never told her. So finally I said, well, that's how I got my husband's called me in, told her the story and told her the truth. And she said, oh my God, I had no idea what that was going on. And I said, well, I couldn't tell you. I tried to tell you. And with the first marriage, she said to me, when a man abuses you, he abuses you. You just have to put up with it for the sake of the children, go home and be abused and let him hit you and do whatever you have to do. Well, I hadn't told her that he was also making me do nude modeling. So she didn't know that bit. So when I finally told her later, during the second marriage, when I wasn't doing nude modeling anymore, she was, oh my God, who's going to know about this? Everyone's going to know. And then, we're going to have bad people talking about us. I said, Ma'am, I didn't use my real name. Nobody knew where I lived, and, and so on and so forth. So that put her at peace for a while. Now, I'm coming through all of this. I've told you I was doing this stuff and modeling, and I've been raped and got babies and lost them and so on, and got married and had my own babies and learned to be a mother in the right way. So now I'm going to show you this. The book that I wrote, Pro-Life, Pro-Choice, Pro-Spirit. I wrote this, I think it says in 2004 or 5, but we didn't actually publish it until 2007, because I had to find a publisher who would publish it. And the reason this book was written was because there were so many women during that time who were being abused, raped, left pregnant, trying to get an abortion, and America was not letting anyone have an abortion. And then all of a sudden there was laws changed and women were allowed to have abortion. Now we have the tussle going on between all the religions and all the different points of view. And here am I with my history of having to walk that pathway, being pregnant, lost it by abuse and misuse, and then have my children in marriages where I was still abused in the marriages, by my first husband, who would just take me no matter whether I said I didn't want it or whatever. And then to the second marriage where that person was drunk all the time and didn't want to love me at all. So I went on the other side of the fence where things were not viable. So I moved into, I'm a woman, I'm supposed to enjoy my body. I can have boyfriends again. So when I divorced the second man, I was playing around, enjoying myself. And I have to tell you, I was in command of myself. I knew I was earning enough money. I knew what I was doing. My kids didn't know anything, so that was good. And so, and I'm doing all the church services, and nobody knows about that side of my life as well. So I've become very famous as a medium in the churches. And now I've got like 2 boys about 7 and 8, and I've got 2 children about 2 and 4, something like that. I haven't bothered to work it out here. I'm just talking, and so I'm needing, to make money, because my husband is trying to build a business that failed, and then he starts up again and tries again. And so a lot of times we're in debt in the bank with not much money. And so I was still modeling because we needed the money. And by the time I'd got to the point where I was really an established medium now, the mind, body, spirit events had started up. And so I was doing those as well, and earning my reputation as a medium, healer, lecture, teacher, author. And I was only writing little booklets in those days, like "You Are Psychic" or something. I didn't consider myself a medium because I was dyslexic, and I often spelt things back to front because I couldn't see that they were spelt back to front. And of course, we didn't have computers coming out yet back in those days. So typewriters were the in thing, and I'd learned that in school as well, and bookkeeping and all this stuff. I went to a very good school. And so I was managing my husband's business. In fact, I was managing both husbands' businesses at the different times, and I haven't bothered to talk about our business with the first one, which was sort of knock on the door and sell brooms and brushes and sticks and things that we would take to the house, and people would buy it and pay for it and so on. So I was learning how to manage money. I was learning how to manage my body. I was learning how to manage my life. I was growing up into a mature woman. And by the time I was 35, I was a very well-known medium in England, and no more doing anything with the women who were, still on the game and all that. I've left them and told them they have to manage on their own and so on. They were bonded together and formed a little organization for supporting women who were abused and misused. That was the kind of thing that I could do. I couldn't officially tell people that I was running that kind of event for these girls, because the two wouldn't marry. If you're a spiritual person up here, you're not talking to a prostitute down here. So I had to keep on the quiet, but I was still helping them. And by the time the mind, body, spirit events came in, there were a lot more women who were doing reading tarot cards by now, asking, have they got spirit guides and so on. So I started to teach some of the girls who are in the game how to attune to their psychic skills. And my goodness, as we used to say over there, which was an ad for Guinness beer that people used to drink. These women, because of the pain, because of the suffering, because of the anxiety, just like I'd been through, their emotions were so strong that as soon as they started to attune to clairvoyance, they could see the spirit guides through their third eye. They could feel the spirit guides behind them and the energy coming in. And I was amazed, because I thought I was the only one that could do this, because I've been doing it from a child. And to my amazement, they were just reading people willy-nilly. And so at that point, I thought, well, I've taught the girls on the game. I want to start teaching the people in the church. Now, the people in the church were mostly older. I'm still in my 30s. And some of these people are 60s and 70s. And I got in with them, and we sat in seance circles in those days. So you learn to be a trance medium. And within no time at all, spirit guides who've been with me and teaching me all through the years took me into trance. And so I would be the lead trance speaker in all these circles where we would sit and do this. And while this was going on, I was channeling like Queen Elizabeth I. And she, one day, came through me and said, no woman should ever be left alone. And everybody thought of Queen Elizabeth I as a woman alone. But she admitted to me she had her lovers in the court. I'm not saying any more than that, because it doesn't matter, and she's long gone. But at that time, it was something I needed to hear from her, that I could forgive myself for walking, into the stripping side and all of that because of my ex-husband. And so I was able to put it into balance and realize that if I hadn't have gone through all those things, I wouldn't have been able to help the abused women who are in marriages, who are being beaten up by their drunk husbands every night. I will say my drunk husband did not beat me, but his mouth was cruel. And I didn't like that. And bedtime was non-existent, because he would tell me to F in the other room or something. So he just was not a nice person to be with. I can talk about these guys, by the way, because they're passed on, and it doesn't matter anyway. But the point is, it's not about me that I'm saying all this. What I'm trying to point out here is that the abuse women went through from World War I through all the wars in America to today, where you still see it going on, where women believe that the only way they can make a roof over their head for their babies is to be a prostitute. And it's still going on. Even though we have people who are now having schools for these babies where they can leave their baby in school, where someone's looking after them, and go and work, say, in Walmart or someone and make some money. But it's not enough. And social is supposed to help women. And we've got all sorts of people all over this world saying, it's your fault, you opened your legs, you've got a baby, I don't want to help you. But the fact that the guy forced her to open her legs, or the fact that he promised her everything but the kitchen sink if she opened her legs, and so on. Women were desperate for love, for being praised as someone beautiful who had held the country together during wars and was here in these loving arms waiting for Prince Charming to come home, only to either find he was killed in action and she's got his baby and no way to go but to go on the streets. Okay? I was there for those women because I knew what it was like to be abused and be left with a baby. The difference was I did lose it twice. And I would clearly say that I had no guilt because each of the spirit guides that were with me when I did get pregnant were bonding with me on an inner level so that I could be better with them, so that I could go on to work with the women of the world who were in some way prostitutes. So when I went to India, I had 8 or 9 people as students with me, and we would go to all the sightseeing places. But while I was on that trip, I also went down into the areas with my purse up here real high, with some money, rupees for the women who had all these children where they've been raped and abused. I did that because I knew how they felt, you see, because I'd been in that shoe. I'd understood what it was like. I'd worked with the women in England who were abused all the time. I worked with the women in America too, on the phone in the deep south, who were calling me up and saying, I've got a new boyfriend. Do you think he'll marry me? I've already got 4 children from 4 different guys who said he'd marry me, and this one says he really will. So, okay, what do you want to tell me about this one? Well, he comes over, he has a nice time with me, and then he says, we'll get married next year. And it's now 4 years, and I've got 4 of his babies plus 3 of others. I've got 7 children, one lady said, and he's not marrying me. What should I do? So instead, I start a class free online where I tell these girls, you can call me and I will tell you how to not behave and how to behave to make sure you don't get pregnant and so on. So these women in the Deep South had no idea how to prevent pregnancy. Nobody was telling them about pills and things. So, when I came over here in 1982, I did a couple of shows on somebody's show where we were talking about prostitution and how many women who were just coming from regular jobs are still making yuppie on the night time while the kids are sleeping because they're not making enough money. So they're getting paid for it. Okay? So yes, it was going on in America, so I had to do that. So things get worse. The religion's poured into it. Everybody is blaming and shaming the women, not the men. The women are enticing the men. The men are weak. They don't know how to say no and walk away from a prostitute. Okay? Yes, that was going on because the men had no intentions of being married. They just wanted their fun. So we suddenly had a whole swamping of many women who had been promised they would, when guys coming back from wars in America, different things all going on in the 60s, 1960s. And so promised they would, marry them and do everything and didn't. So the same thing was happening in America and all over the world where wars were going on. Women were giving their bodies in the hope they get some food for the children, food for themselves if they can get extra, money to go buy monthly sanitary towels and things like that, soaps to wash the babies. We don't realize today, the children, I should say, of today, do not realize how bad it was for women in the turn of the 19th century, 20th century. It was so bad. Women were, even the ones who were well versed and educated, would be arranged into a marriage in the 1800s. And then the husband would take all their money and then get some doctor to come in and say the wife is unstable, put her in a mental asylum where they never get out. And he's got all the money and squandering it. I'm sure you've probably seen movies about it, but it was real. It really did happen. And today, women are still sleeping around. They believe that if they give their body to the guy will take care of them. And I'm here to say to you, if you are doing anything with your body to try and get someone to take care of you, stop right now. Because the only person that is ever going to take care of you is not your children, it's you. And if you don't find a way to take care of yourself with the children when they are young, they will grow up being angry with you that you weren't there for them so often because you were in another room or somewhere else up the road and you've left them to take care of themselves while you're doing whatever you have to do to earn money. They as children don't understand neglect. They just feel it and they get angry. And as time goes by, world changed. You started to get social security in this country. Everyone started to get help in other countries, European countries that is. So women started to receive help. So women could start to earn more money. And as you know today, we can now say that women are in high places with good education. They've gone to universities, they're lawyers, they're doctors like me, I'm a doctor. And we've all found ways to help the women who are still on the street to see us as role models, to be able to say we've lived the life, we've walked the walk, we've talked the talk, and look where we're at now. There are women trying to be in parliaments in different countries. I'm coughing because it still annoys me in my throat chakra that there are still so many women who are working in countries where they're in sweatshops. They have to make all these clothes that are then shipped over here to America, and we buy them for $5, not thinking that someone has sweated to make maybe 100 of those for something like, I don't know, because I don't know the money, so I'll just talk American and say $1 a week, which hopefully will buy them soup and some bread. And yes, they've got children at home who are also on the game because there's nowhere else to go to get money. The Middle East is like that. Women are controlled and blamed and shamed, and now they've covered them all up again. Educated women, women who went to university can't practice, can't be what they want because the men believe they're losing control. So they've now controlled the women yet again. That is the Piscean Age. 3,500 years of men controlling women. Now, wrapped into that, because I'm also going along the pathway of my spirituality, women were more and more doing things like cross my palm and my hand with a coin and I'll give you a message. Bang on the door of someone's house in England and hope they will give you a quarter, a silver coin of some sort, sixpence in England, old money. Don't have that anymore now. So the world has changed. But those were, shall we say, gypsy people. And the gypsy people were able to collect rubbish and turn it into money. But they lived in dirty raids, piles of junk all over the yards of areas that they've commandeered to decide to settle with their, I don't even know what you call them now, but their little home, which is a, I can't think of the word, I'm sorry, but you know, a round top, I guess I'm not meant to say it, but anyway, they're travelling vans that they would go from one place to another, and if they didn't sell the junk that they collected from the local homes, they would leave it behind because it was too much to carry. And then people would complain, gypsies are all a nuisance because they abuse us and they abuse the land and so on and so forth. And now the religion kicks in. And people are saying you're not worshipping God, you're worshipping tarot cards and playing cards and so on, you know. And all this was going on when I was a little child. And by the time I was 16, there were gypsies all over Europe who were making a life's living by anything from setting one of their girls up for a man to come and pay and sleep with that girl who might only be 12 years old and get money from them. And so the children of the gypsies were also turned into prostitutes. We could go on and on about all the bad things, but let's fast forward now and say at least we now know that most of the Western countries, they have places where women can go and get a roof over their head for the night with their children and get a meal in their belly. But it's not enough. What's got to change is the Aquarian Age, and we're in it now. And the truth is, we're still thinking like Piscean older people. We can't have our children thinking, I have to go on the game to feed my kids. We have to teach our children to understand that education is vital to the future of every individual person. Whatever your education is, whether it's to speak a second language, whether it's to work in an office or go to university, there has to be a means of ways of assessing everyone's education, their brain, how it evolves and how they have learned and used it. I've seen some of those girls who are prostitutes turn into lawyers. They've come from other countries. They've come where they've been sold to men and they've escaped because a British person has brought them over and put them through education. And I actually know in my own family group that there is one judge who is very well thought of these days, who came from another country where she was having to use her body. So I've said a lot here, and I would say there is a point to this. Not to look back and go, oh, that was Piscean, and then dismiss it and say, okay, well, it's okay today because I've got my kid in kindergarten and I've got this job. I hate it, but I'm doing it and I can pay for a roof over my head. But you're still miserable. You're still trapped in the idea that you have to work really hard to keep a roof over your head and keep your babies fed. You've got to get rid of that. No, you're not going to get rid of it now because you're already a mother with the children, but those are your children that you can teach that education is important. Right now, we're seeing that children are not seeing education as important. All they see is that phone. That phone is teaching us don't need a phone, because as long as you have a phone, you can't learn. You can't see what's going on around you because your face is looking at it. You don't know if there's some man following you home who's going to rape you, kill you, and now the police have to spend ages finding out who it was who did it. Yes, we've had a lot of that lately. And you need to realize that your child is not learning how to be social. Your child is not learning how to understand the systems that exist within the social structures that America and all the other countries have. The women who have been on the game are now the teachers to say to these children, do you want to be a prostitute or do you want to go work in an office? What do you want to do? And make it clear that these children who choose to be on the game will eventually one day have to go back to school and learn something because their body won't be pretty anymore. And all they'll have is old drunk men who stink turning up to want free time with them for dollars. Is that what you want for yourself? Is that what you want to show your children that they too can do one day? Of course not. So be a mother who aspires to show your children how important education is. Like I said in the beginning, I was very lucky. I went to a very good school. I had a very, very good education. Even though I was dyslexic, I got what I needed. And even though I was on the sort of, in quotes, edge of the game, I learned through that. I had my eyes, my ears open. I was listening because I had that education under my belt that allowed me to talk on a higher level and talk differently and do things differently. I wormed my way slowly away from the horrible stuff into the I'm in charge of me part and go on to say I can do anything I want to do. So along with that, my psyche was developing all the time because those spirit guides that have bonded with me in the womb were now bonded with me spiritually. And from that time, I was now bonded with many, many other spirit entities and alien entities who are spirits. So my life evolved to become a very, very educated, spiritual, psychic, medium, healer, lecturer, teacher, author, and eventually a doctor and a professor. So I can sit here and say I'm 83 years old and I'm enjoying my life now because I'm able to talk about all the things I've done in my life with no fear of reprimand, with no fear of people saying, how could you do that? You're not worth anything. Why? Because I understand that in order to save people, and just like Jesus, who I was with once upon a time in ancient times, to be able to say, anyone is welcome to sit on my floor and hear my stories and tell people you too can rise above this type of life. So 3,500 years ago, Jesus was saying to the prostitutes, you don't have to be one. You can massage people, you can heal people, you can tell people about God, you can tell people about love divine, you can tell people how we all have spirit God with us, the oneness, in a time when nobody believed that a God could be a loving God, because God was a ruling God, like the Greeks, and they all had to have a good body, and so you have to show off your good body and have rampant sexy parties. Still prostitution, okay? And then we go into the Roman time. Well, they have all their Roman gods who are telling them to be great warriors, but great warriors have to show themselves great on every level, socially, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And what did the women have to do in those days? Serve them. Well, do you want to be someone who's serving a man with opening your legs today? Do you want to be taking a job where your boss treats you like dirt because you need the money, when you could tell yourself, go back to school, get more education, do it online because there's loads of stuff online, learn how to help people, learn how to make money while you're helping people, learn how to embrace the Aquarian Age. And what is the Aquarian Age about? To sit down and discuss your life, your experiences, what you've been doing, and how you failed, and then what you did to rise above that, and go out there in the world and teach these young ones how to fight for their independence, how to stand individually and listen to what everything is going on around you, whether it's on TV, whether it's in the street, whether it's at work, or whether it's in the church. You have your right to be you and believe what you want to believe and do what you want to do, and never let anyone destroy your sense of self-esteem, self-worth, and self-value. Now, having said that, guess who is the world's worst person for destroying that? It's yourself. I've been on the game. I'm not good. Well, that's not good to say to yourself. I can't study very well. I'm dyslexic. That wasn't very good to tell myself, was it? I'm never going to be able to write a book because of that. Hello? I've written 20 books today published, and I've still got 10 I'm finishing. Right? How did I write them? Channeling, downloading, listening to spirit guides. I learned I can write. And with spell check, well, it doesn't matter if I make typos because it tells me that's wrong. So I correct it. There is so much online for young people to learn, but they're not using it for learning. They're using it for fun, playing games. I want to get the most points. I want to be everybody else's online. I don't want to do my homework because I have to read a book, but I can go online and cheat and get AI to write it for me. That is not good, because they're not even reading what the AI has written. And teachers going, oh, you did very well, here's an A. What do you think? Are you a mother realizing that your children are not bringing home the knowledge, the wisdom, the inspiration to want to be something more? This is why I am talking about my life here today. I did not want my children to go through what I went through. Obviously, I've got 4 sons, but you know, a lot of boys did open up their legs too. So that's been a big thing. Now, today, it's okay to be gay, to marry your lover, and it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on, male or female. But here's the religion again, saying you're a sinner. But stop and think. We reincarnate many, many times. We've all been men and we've all been women. We've all learned throughout history of many different ages that it doesn't matter whether we're born as man or as woman. What matters is that we appreciate the person we are inside this body. So I'm a woman and I appreciate all my skills and all my talents and everything else. But I also appreciate all the male people around me who've turned me into what I am today by either being negative or being supportive. And in different ways to understand that as I've counseled the many men, hundreds and thousands of men and women, I'm not exaggerating. Spirit actually tells me it's millions, but there we are. Because when you're doing videos and all sorts of things and doing conferences, you just don't realize just how many people's hearts you touch. I want you to hopefully feel that today I've put some little markers in your brain box about you to think about your life and everything that you've done, even if you're feeling disgraced by it or misplaced by it or lost with it or anything. You have the ability to turn that around and say, of all those experiences, what have I become? If I'm miserable and depressed, why am I miserable and depressed? I should be saying I'm miserable and depressed because I now know who half the other population of my local town feels too. So why don't I go out and find those women and form a group and have us all come together in this Aquarian age and sit down and discuss what was, and then say, what are we going to do to prevent the children of the future for following into our footsteps? We don't want that. What structures can we see that we can put together to make sure that these kids get the good education, that choose to go wherever they want to go for that education, and to be able to appreciate their life in every sense of the word because they're given the right kind of love and support from both teachers and home. Hear that, home. Most of the children who go to school who play up the teachers do not have a good home. They may have all the toys, they may have nice furniture, but mum's off doing something elsewhere half the time, dad's off somewhere else, kids are bought every toy they ever want, and there's a sense of nothing in their heart, no love, no support. So what do? They go to school and play up so they can get some attention. And that attention, whether it's good or bad, is better than no attention. So if you're a rich, wealthy family and you don't have time with your children, start having them. If, on the other hand, you're a mum who works 4 jobs and your kids are left home to try and cook their dinners themselves and whatever, go out. Find some other mums who are doing the same thing and find a way to form a service to one another. That, for example, we did this a while back, 20 odd years ago in Japan, I talked about it, where there are 5 mums working and 5 kids left with mothers-in-law. And mothers-in-law were really dominant and aggressive, so children were unhappy and unmanageable. So what I suggested to these women was you pick a routine where instead of working 7 days a week, you work 6 days a week. And on the 7th day, that person stays home while the other 6 go to work and look after all those children in a kindergarten scenario. Once I spread that word, all sorts of kindergartens started to loom up all over Japan, and mothers are working now and being independent and not being forced to be in arranged marriages and so on. I love Japan and I love the women, they're great, but the men had to learn to be responsible and be fathers. And each of the families, instead of arranged marriages, had to learn to fall in love. When I first went to Japan, I asked them to say, I love you. They were like, I can't say that. I said, well, what do you say in your language? I think of you. That doesn't say a lot. I honor you. I respect you to the man. Does he say that to her? No. But through the years, and I was over there for over 20 years with one company and 26, I don't know, I lost count. 26 years, I think, altogether. I was over in Japan, but I was in India, I went to Egypt, I went to Europe all over, France, Switzerland, Spain, Germany, published in German, India, I love that, South America, so I've had a good life, all because my psyche had the experience of the foundation stone of seeing women and men being abused after the wars and coming back to understand that they need help. And in being able to listen to my spirit guides to help thousands and thousands of people around the world. Okay. Well, I'm not traveling so much now, but I am going to be doing more talks like this one, The Truth. This is a long one. It took an hour and a half. And so I'm going to end it now. And I will say to you, if you feel like making some comments below, I never ask people to make comments. And I do have a lot of videos on YouTube. And I do have a Journey into an Unknown World radio show on iTunes. Those are half-hour shows and we're just talking. You might like to listen to those. Lots of help there. And let me know if you have particular topics you'd like me to make videos about, and I will be just so happy to do it for you. So once again, I'm bringing up this book, right? If you have to make a choice, you must make it according to your feelings and your thoughts. You cannot make this choice according to other people and society. You must think about it yourself. And if you are a doctor who wants to help people do it the right way, then please do. And if you are a backstreet doctor who doesn't know what to do, please learn to help the woman understand that there are herbal remedies that can make the baby leave the womb, such as ogometry. So from that, I'm saying, I'm holding it better, that's right. What I'm saying is read this book, because it will teach you through the oneness, because the spirit guides wrote this through me. And it tells you about how the baby is received in the oneness, the spirit, the person who doesn't want to be born, but wants to touch the earth for prep for a later life, and things like that are taught in this. So thank you for listening to me. And I do hope that you will come on and listen to a little bit more. I've got one more that I want to do, which is long like this, that Spirit wants me to do, actually. So I'm ending this now. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.